winter evening.
Yeah, this is I admit that it's a little, we are a little bit in that triggering space. I know that a lot of people get hyped up about the winter storms, especially in our, kind of the midsection and the region of the country. And meteorologists, they're like, we're excited because we've got a lot to talk about for like an extended period of time. But for those of us, who are in a state where it really shouldn't be an issue, and we shouldn't be looking at, I saw this. Some people are using the presence of one of our senators, whether he's in the state or if he's traveling to like Cancun, as a
Oh.
measure of how serious the storm actually may be.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're getting. I think we're both in a storm tracking mode. I think the South is going to get some weird ice storms and maybe some snow in different parts. But yeah, the weather patterns have been just completely out of whack. Um, we had we're getting really cold days, and I'm looking outside, and you know we got a few inches of snow today, and then I think we're going to get more on Sunday. So
It was like 71 today.
71. That'd be nice.
I mean, it was
I
cold.
need
It's
to.
been cold. It's been cold, but it's like we got this like burst of like a little bit of warmth to just trick everybody. Um, and then we'll be back to,
Well, cold. What's your cold? What's a cold day for you?
well, I mean, we've
Temperature wise.
actually, well, for me personally, or for
Well,
like,
like recently.
we've had freezing.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah, oh
looking
yeah.
at
I
the
mean,
weather
our
tomorrow.
swings are sort of stupid, you know.
Let's see. Tomorrow it will be 22 with a low of 10. Friday it will be a low of -9, uh, with a high of 10. And then Saturday a low of -12 with a high of 5.
Yeah,
That's
that's why I live where I live.
below freezing.
That's why I live where I live. We've had this conversation. So yeah, we're gonna suddenly go from being in the 70s for our highs to the 30s
Yeah, that
in
that
like
would suck. That would
in like
suck.
2 days, 2.5 days. Kind of, it's a little bit odd. So
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Anyway, we shouldn't complain. We're not here to talk about weather. We're here to talk about sketches
and coffee.
and
I
coffee.
mean, it's important to hydrate and in hydrating also balance that with a good cup of coffee, because as you pointed out to me today, um, we have to maybe raise our glass and a toast to memory of David Lynch.
Is this the anniversary day?
Yes.
Mm. I've seen some since the morning. Yeah, I've seen some social media posts about our dear friend, a friend. Well, I would love to call him a friend, but yeah, David Lynch. Twin Peaks. I sent you some fun Twin Peaks artwork this morning
Yes.
that I saw. I thought it was kind of neat. But yeah, so what are you drinking though in your coffee? In your cup?
So this is one of those like guilty pleasure coffee buys at this time of year, to like throw in the mix. It's that Community Coffee Mardi Gras blend with the cinnamon and vanilla kind of in the mix, like notes in the sort of the medium roast coffee. Um,
Nice. Well, that sounds nice. I actually we have at the moment some good old Tim Hortons. It just looked really appealing at the grocery store, so I got a big bag. Tim Ho?
Well, I mean, the prime minister had a really big speech, out of Davos, and
Oh yeah.
a lot of people getting excited about the old. People weren't too sure, but I will say a lot of folks were impressed, and so yeah, Timmy stock up, um, elbows out.
Excellent.
So,
Excellent. Yeah. So yeah, it's nice. Sometimes you go with what works. It works, so you don't mess around with it. So what else do we want to talk about the sketches with
I want to
theme,
check
or was there
in.
something?
Like I do, I want to get to the sketches, but I want to briefly check in on our words. Since we just had our episode with our,
Oh yeah.
kind of New Year's and our
That's a good point.
words.
Yeah, that came out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll go briefly. My word was self-care. Yeah, I think the camera is ruining my perspective here, but I was on a streak where I was actually shaving, with an actual razor. It sounds worse than it is. Um, and then today though, I've been snowed in, and so I haven't shaved. So now, so that was kind of part of my self care routine. I was trying to, shave a little more regularly. Look helps me feel look a little younger. So that's the progress. I will get back on it, tomorrow, and and so that's the progress. That's it's only been a few weeks, right? 3 to be exact. So
Of shaving?
yeah, probably.
Oh my goodness! If I did that, like I'd be like,
Oh no. This isn't 3 weeks of not shaving. This is
oh,
only a
okay,
few days.
okay.
But around the new year, I was trying to regularly shave.
Oh, you're
And
trying. I
now, but
follow
I don't.
you.
It doesn't look like it, right? Well, my point is, yeah, I don't look. Although nobody on the audio can
No,
hear the whiskers, right?
no, they're
But
just imagining the reaction.
it's scruffy.
It's it's jarring. I mean, it's just that beard that you have. It's just jarring.
It's a spiral. It's definitely a
Right.
spiral. So what about
For
you?
those who know the two of us in real life, um, I can't remember the last time I didn't have a beard.
Yeah, I
Like
know. I
there
can't
would be
either.
like there
I
would be
don't
like a
think
lot
I've
of
ever
like,
seen it. Maybe in a
yeah,
photograph, in a distant memory.
yeah. There's photographic of it, like always, like you'd be really hard pressed to find one without any facial hair, like clean shaven Jamie. Mm,
Yeah.
that's the way back. So
Yeah, but it
I
works for
would be
you. It just
personally
doesn't work
frightened.
for me.
I would be personally frightened to see like just the so yeah, not sure.
Oh yeah, I love it. So what about your resolution word of the year
So
and
mine was
progress?
create,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not making much progress. Um, like on the page. Ooh, wow! It was I added a sound
Well
effect there.
timed. Well
Um,
timed
yeah.
sound effect.
Ding. All right, you're done. Um, no, but I was sort of sharing with you before we got on that I feel like I've been doing a lot of reading. Um, uh, I have mentioned before that we have the book club, um, which is sort of an inside joke amongst some of us that we have the book club, but it's also when you well, I find myself reading even more than I normally. I mean, I always read, never stopped, but the book club sort of focused my attention a little bit because somebody else was picking the book for me. It's like that whole thing about prompts, right? Somebody else is always picking the book, and
Mm.
we vote. I mean, it's democratic. We vote. Sometimes we don't get the books that we want, folks, but we still participate. Um, and but I have found myself reading up and just trying to digest a lot more information, and I'm hoping that some of that is going to result in me kind of moving past my hesitancy to kind of commit to some of this creation.
Yeah.
So it's not to
Well,
say that, not to say I've told you, it's not to say that there aren't sketches. It's just that I haven't felt the compulsion to post the way I was doing. And that's unlike, that's a departure, right? So, you know, TBD.
Your creation needs my self-care.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But
I just need to.
I think this conversation today will actually help. So we're going to talk a little bit about diagrammings. So this diagramming, excuse me, and I for my students that might be listening or watching, this should be considered bonus content outside of class hour, class time, in order to get Jamie's take on diagrams so that you're completely informed. And it's fun. I love talking about diagrams, and I hope the students understand that. But so, and then there was a couple other things. Actually, I wanted to before we talk about the sketches, Jamie, in order to get you put a seed in your brain about diagrams, is that in on this. So I teach a studio and the lab this semester. So studio is kind of the synthesis of the design. Lab is going to be focused on diagrams, and then the ideation, the generation of the idea that then feeds into studio to develop the design. And the first assignment is due Friday, so this is the second week of school. We had a holiday on Monday. First assignment due Friday, and the format is a 3-slide PechaKucha. So all the students are going to pitch their position, but we're giving them 1 minute per slide. So we're giving them a little extra time. I told them I spent almost an hour today in lab describing PechaKucha and the format and the
There are videos.
energy.
There are videos.
I told them to go look for videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
And so we're hoping they'll have a little fun with it on Friday. So anyway, so
they were all watching videos of Peter Exley doing like, I'm a fun architect. I like to sketch. And
I'll have to find that particular reference for them. They won't know who Peter is.
We need to get Peter on this, by the way, because
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and we need to line that up for the new year.
I mean, he is aware that we do this. I mean, he knows us and he knows this. So, but now, for those who are listening, Peter has spent a lot of time doing PechaKucha, especially when he was in Chicago, and incredible sketcher though. And I definitely follow Fun Architect on Instagram for his sketches. What I've liked, and I haven't specifically asked him this because I keep thinking we're going to have him on the podcast. But if he's listening, or if somebody sort of prompts him with this question, I think anybody who looks at his reels of most recent sketches, or sort of even just the last 6 months, say, there's a beautiful thematic aspect to all of his sketches, and you can tell that it's what he wants it to be, and he's giving us clues when he's posting, and he's sort of telling a story through the sketch, which is, I think, a lot of what we'll talk about today, in terms of diagrams too. But some of it isn't completely in your face, like, hey, here's my story, now look at my pictures, look at my sketches. There's an element of allowing the viewer to sort of engage with the image a bit and start to almost infer what the story may be. And even if they don't completely get the whole story, there's clearly an underlying meaning that's a little bit captivating. And sometimes that nuance, especially in short presentations, speaking to your Pechakucha, I think that's the engagement part, that's the magic that happens in some of that. Having done my first Pechakucha last fall, that was the thing that kept running around in my head is how do you make it where you have enough of an image that's sort of interesting on the screen, even if you don't say a word.
Mm. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But
Right.
then all the words that you're adding to it are just adding layers of meaning.
Yeah.
And then knowing that there's more images to come. And by the end of it, you have woven a story together, but in that amount of time, you haven't been able to tell a complete picture. And you're allowing the viewer to kind of engage with it in both auditory as well as sort of visuals. And ideally, if you've attended one of these events, so you're not just online, scrolling through and digesting a Pechakucha that way, but actually going out, in sort of a guerrilla format, Pechakucha, especially in the cities that I've been able to experience it in, in less formal settings, it has kind of a guerrilla quality. Like, it's like, let's go to that warehouse, let's set up the projector, let's get somebody up on stage, and not let them control the clicker and let them tell a story through their images. And, with a bunch of people we may or may not know in the audience with us.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun,
Right.
And there's an energy about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the ones that I've been to have been usually at like bars, sort of social, or even if it's not in a bar, right? Like in your case, I'm sure there was some libations and social gathering.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There was years where, like, clearly they had a sponsor, and then some where you're like, there's sort of settings. Like, there was one in Austin that was super memorable, and I loved it. And I came out, I went by myself, and had told some folks, hey, let's go to this, and nobody was able to go. I went by myself, and it was sort of in a weird spot in Austin, and everyone's like, where is that? And I'm like, well, I don't know. It's just like, I'm gonna go and whatever. And went, and then when I got there, I'm like, where am I? And I was like at a dead shopping mall. And so it was literally like a dead shopping mall. And so there was like an anchor tenant space, like, acoustical tiles. Some of them were in the grid, some of them weren't. There was power to the building, but there was like, there was maybe some displays that were sort of off in the corner that they didn't even take when they left the space.
Sure.
And, you had the party tables, the fold out tables, and then like sort of a DIY bar setup in the corner, but projector, on a chair, and, projecting to a wall, dimly lit, the whole bit, but there's like a PA. And the fact that you could do it with such little stuff and have 10 people get up and present and hold an audience's attention for like 2 hours, right? Yes, there were libations, but it was great. I mean, it was like, it was something that you're like, you felt like the cops were going to show up because we weren't really supposed to be in that space. And then they would be questioning you, like, why are you even doing this? Like, not like there's anything going on that's bad, but it was like, what you're telling stories, right? What?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, thanks for that corroboration. So now the evidence is clear, and hopefully the students gather that. So what are we looking at? We decided to pick a couple of sketches. We went back in time a little bit with Jamie's drawings. And I know we discussed that they are well, I guess both, but they're in Venice, right? Venice, Italy, and at the Biennale this year, or I guess technically last year. It's now complete, but on the left, the which is the left side of the page is you said Marlon Blackwell, right?
Correct.
Architect, or an American architect, particular pavilion installation for the Biennale, with some diagrams and in the sketch, I believe. And then on the right hand side is Carlos Scarpa's, which is an older building. I'm not familiar with the terrain, but is that Scarpa building adjacent to where the Biennale is located, or
Well, so it's and I might have prompted you sort of like a little bit, that a little bit incorrectly. So
oh,
for students, listeners, all that stuff, if you get the chance to go to Venice, definitely make your way to the Biennale site. So kind of if you go to Piazza San Marco and the floods, and you sort of see the church and the palazzo, and the Olivetti store if you're going to see Scarpa, kind of all in that space. Harry's bar is sort of to the south side, planned south of the piazza. Go get a drink. But from that location, it's a good little walk, but it's definitely worth your time to go to the Biennale site, and where there are permanent pavilions that have been built, and a lot of additional structures as well. So ticket booths, kind of library spaces, that allow this sort of park ground to be transformed for different parts of the year, into an exhibit of kind of world art, and then also world architecture, depending on the year. And so these permanent pavilions are associated with different countries. So the one on the left that Kurt was starting out with, talking about Marlon Blackwell's installation, that is the U.S. pavilion. So the U.S. pavilion originally was built in the 20s, I believe, 1930. Excuse me, 1930, by Delano and Aldrich as architects, and it has a real classical kind of, almost a bit of a Federalist style, kind of building colonnade, and brick structure with columns out front. So it does kind of create that loggia porch kind of aspect to the building. It's a little bit of a kind of an anti-court space, kind of as you're walking towards it. But inside there's a series of galleries, and designed as effectively like a little small museum space, right? And has sort of an architecture that is reminiscent of kind of early U.S. Federalist, which is borrowing from French and European influences. A lot of Jeffersonian kind of architecture that, if you're kind of thinking of things, stateside. All that to say is that porch space, that plaza, that piazza that's in front of that building, ends up in this particular past year getting transformed quite literally into the theme of the U.S. pavilion for that year. So the architecture exhibit, all of the exhibits generally have a theme. Multiple artists or architects are sort of curated by the master curator into an exhibition of a variety of different works. There's also temporary exhibits going on that aren't even on the Biennale site. There's other ones all throughout Venice. But the permanent pavilions end up being kind of the epicenter for a country's expression of a particular idea. In this particular case, the theme was literally the word porch. And so naturally, someone like Marlon Blackwell out of Arkansas, um, very, very talented and distinguished architect in his own right and educator, is, with collaborators, but sort of leading the charge on this theme of porch, and created the design to change the nature of that space, so that you get sort of two readings of it. You get sort of the new and the old, the um, kind of opportunity to gather, the opportunity to move through. There's sort of vistas and vistas in, and then sort of vistas out from that space, that are, all kind of architectural elements that have been reimagined by this temporary exhibit. And so that's sort of the initiative for the first sketch. My daughter actually was able to go to the Biennale this year, so I was super jealous.
Ooh.
Um,
Ooh.
and was able to go to some of these exhibits and sort of experience them, in person, which is, I think, the way to do it, of course. But yeah, the sketches sort of are me sort of always fascinated with temporary exhibitions or sort of parasitic architecture. And so this was a really pure expression of that in Blackwell's case. So I won't talk about the diagram aspects of it too much. I'll let Kurt investigate it a little bit, and then we can kind of talk about it a little bit more.
Well, sure. I think the diagramming aspect. Well, let me talk about Blackwell first, right? Because you mentioned Arkansas, right? So he's southern, or a southern-based architecture firm, within, um, you know, with an understanding of the culture of porch in the South, especially with, say, you know, uh, um, Black or minority culture, within, the American South, and the understanding of how the porch is this semi-private, semi-public zone between sidewalk and building. And we've talked a lot about Sam Mockbee too, right? And his work in the South, and utilizing small, low budget materials to generate solutions, and then always kind of coming back to the vernacular, right? That is a familiar sense of form and space for the region. So I think the porch, this concept of porch, I mean, because you said it was a team effort as well, but so Blackwell kind of sort of the coordinator of it, which is another interesting topic of when you put together a kind of a dream team of architects for the Biennale, you're going to have a lot of potential egos, or clash of ego or opinion and thought. And so the execution, while I was not in the room when the design meetings were occurring for something like this, but we also have our students working in teams, and we had this discussion about, backing design decisions with citation or resource, a reference point, versus backing it with opinion. And so, you had multiple firm leaders that are kind of collaborating on this thing to generate what is the physical manifestation of a porch for this space in the Biennale in a temporary manner. So anyway, I think that's another aspect to highlight, at least, that there's an execution that was of a design that did come together. And
Well,
I think,
and I was just going to say, and to echo that, is that there is a moment of magic, admittedly, when you are working in a team, where everyone around the table looking at that sketch. I think when we had Eric on, he was describing one of those moments earlier in his career, kind of where he had sort of drawn a few simple lines on a page, and it really captured the essence of kind of the concept. And I think that that's the whole thing that I was trying to get at with these sketches was, um, would it surprise you that this pavilion had a color, a very distinct color? It had sort of a almost like an aquamarine blue, kind of color.
Hmm.
Um, these sketches that we're looking at on the screen are in black and white. The color, in my view, wasn't as important to the sketch and my interest in sort of understanding what the pavilion was doing. The color, I love the pop of color in real life that it actually gives, but it wasn't necessary for me to um, color this sketch to make it evoke the things that I was trying to explore.
Hmm.
I think for me, when I was leading into this description of this project, I was talking about the views from within and the views out. And so what you're actually seeing is sort of three sketches on the page. One is looking into the space, one is looking out of the space, and one is just looking at the space where the pavilion is gone. So that you're actually seeing the original US pavilion, in the permanent building that's always there. And then sort of these sort of two vignettes are this study in what does this object do to that space, that experience of that threshold, sort of the way Kurt was just describing a moment ago, sort of the ubiquitous porch, that boundary that really is it a boundary? It can be a boundary between public and private space. It's semi-public, but it's also this sort of dialogue point, and it's a line. And so the pavilion that you're seeing here is really kind of a line. It's an extruded line.
No.
It's given a little bit of depth to compress the space. You're kind of playing with all these kind of architectural games. It has a unique shape. It's a little bit asymmetric. So you kind of want to walk through, the one portal that's sort of created as an archway. Is it an archway? It's suspended above your head. Um, and then the structure is exposed. So there's a inherent view of the object as temporary. It's the skeleton moment that a lot of architects will talk about when things get framed on a site and you say, "Man, that framing, I wish we could just pause it right here." And so when I saw images of the porch completed, with its sort of blue hue and sort of the framing exposed and the light, dappled light going through the wood framing, I was like, that's pretty genius, right? All they did was make a portal. All they did was play with the edge condition, and that's it. One
Right.
move.
Yeah.
One. Decided it was one move, and then in that one move, what are all the little nuances of that move that they could play with?
Yeah. And the evoking a line or the threshold, right? Which then I've been teasing the students about, like, the instance you draw a line, you begin to make decisions about your intentions for a project. And the fact that that line, then manifested into this porch or this threshold, this zone, right? This the space that has interior, exterior, and a transition, as you sort of described the three views that you created. So the diagram of that, right, and the reading of it, and then we've also talked about editing or bias in the sense of your lack of color, which is a style. I don't want to say stylistic necessarily, but a a, a choice of pen, ink, and sketch, um, which removes some of the detail, right? With because color is hierarchically less important than the formal outcome of the project. So choice of presentation method, right? Whether it's in color or not, or a sketch
Well,
or
it's sort of it goes to our conversation that we've had many a time, even offline too, about sort of like if you're sort of iterating and testing ideas. Like I could imagine that there was probably a moment where they had the porch rendered, elevation, all kind of set, and they were like, "Is it orange? Is it green? Is it blue?" And it's always the same building. It's always the same. It's like nothing else has changed other than the color. Like, you know, it, this blue or that blue. It's sort of like when you get the eye test. Is it number one or number two?
right.
Number
And
one, number two.
and there's no right or wrong answer necessarily. It's just a matter of
Oh, especially when you're sitting in that chair with the optometrist. Yeah, definitely not. So,
no, I meant with the architecture, but I suppose your eye
yeah,
test
that's
could be a so bridge the gap over to the Scarpa Pavilion real quick, um, and
yeah.
because I
So
think the
it's
concept we're diagramming wise, yeah, this is great, a great conversation so far.
so it's this building that's sketched here isn't by Scarpa,
Oh, I'm sorry.
but it's an homage to Scarpa.
Uh,
So Carlos Scarpa, who is essentially from the Venice area, so kind of a lot of his primary work is sort of in this region. Um, Italian architect, amazing, one that any student really needs to dig into. And what's interesting about the Venice Biennale site is he had multiple buildings that he designed on the site, and I haven't verified this, but I think he's the only architect who has multiple buildings on the site. Like generally speaking, most of the pavilions are done by one architect, and that's their kind of one-off opportunity. So, in and even in leading to this site, there's a memorial that he designed. That so there's all these sort of imprints of Scarpa kind of all throughout Venice, and then sort of that region. But all that to say is that the the work that he did a lot of times in the Biennale, and then just sort of his work in general, had this really distinctive craft and sort of simplicity of the diagram, and looking for those moments within it to really explore a detail to its sort of finest level of craft. And what's interesting about this particular building is the architect who did it, said that it was an homage to Scarpa, kind of both materially, but also sort of in scale and sort of presence. Um, so this is actually done by James Sterling. So British architect
oh, yeah,
does
right.
this building. Um, and so this series of sketches shows. So this was the library. So this was the sort of the book building, right, on site, and um, the Scarpa had done one, like kind of done a series of buildings as Sterling does this building. And it was he designed the book pavilion in 1991. Sort of this is sort of the end of the thing, and Scarpa's book building, also on the same site, was done in the 50s, but it was destroyed by fire.
Mm.
So it's a bit of an homage to what Scarpa had, but clearly, when you say Sterling, then you kind of see kind of that roof element, and kind of the way the some of those elements of his work are sort of defined.
Hmm.
If you, if kind of this would be a copper roof. So it again would have a patina and all those types of things, but
Right.
it has almost a boat like quality to the floor plan, sort of an elongated plan, sort of a long plan with a roof that's also sort of acting as an extension of interior space to kind of
Hmm.
reach out into the exhibition area. Um, and so I just thought a really kind of beautiful project, and a story about that particular site and sort of the homage, the literal homage to Scarpa that I wasn't necessarily aware of originally. And so as I learn more about his work and then particularly this site, this one sort of stood out to me. So for me, that when things like that, I'm exploring it. When I draw it, you're able to commit a lot of that stuff to memory and sort of think through it yourself. And the plan's super simple: series of bays, all open. Services are all ganged together, kind of in one little zone, which is also sort of the entry point to the space. And all the windows end up acting as storefront. So you can kind of imagine, what it would have been like, almost like a lantern on the site. This long,
Right.
this kind of
Yeah.
long lantern in
Glowing.
the
Yeah.
garden. Yeah.
And do you know if this is a clear story above the little pop up above the roof, or is that just a
I,
parapet sort of element?
I think it's just a little parapet element. Yeah,
Yeah. So then the
from what
yeah
I recall.
the little the drama becomes like the heavy hat over top of the very light facade, the hat of
Right.
the roof, and then when as the say day to night shift would happen, then the thing kind of would glow, like this little long bar of light. So yeah, and I think the idea of within the within Venice and the history of Scarpa in particular, with Sterling referencing Scarpa, has a nice relationship to the essence, the kind of the history or the storyline of the Biennale anyway, right? The sort of revisiting of work with new new generation or fresh eyes or a different perspective, like because it's this biennial uh, uh, curated exhibit. So it's kind of interesting, that as a sense of time and memory of place, you know, grows and changes or alters or modifies, and while that has may or may not necessarily result in a particular diagram, right? But you could probably create a diagram about that. But the just from an architectural premise, right? It is about something, right? And Sterling's work is about something plus, a reference to Scarpa and the previous building, right?
Well, and also just the nature of Venice and water is so critical.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I mean, this building feels like a ship.
Little
It
kind of
sort of it
gondola.
feels, yeah, it feels nautical in a sense, and I think that there's some analogy and metaphor is um, is relatable to a project like this. Um, what drew me to like, I've seen this building in real life, right? And so when I was able to visit the Biennale and um, and didn't kind of know about the homage to Scarpo, so that was sort of me digging in, in the present tense. But what was interesting to me was the reason why I hearkened back to this building to begin with and sort of dug into it was the other image that I shared with you, because we picked these as diagrams to talk about.
Right.
But I think that third image is one that's um, kind of the present day, right? And so it's here, Diller Scofidio Renfro does, and this is part of the way the Biennale works too, is there will be temporary pavilions, just as some of them are freestanding. So not ones like we were talking about with the U.S. Pavilion, where it's sort of a, an add-on or an assemblage, attachment to an exploration of the two things together. In this particular case, they were commissioned to do a temporary pavilion themselves, freestanding building, as a new library. And so I was like, interesting. And it made me think of the old library. And then when I dug into the history of the old library, that's when I found the Scarpa part. Because immediately when I saw this, even though it does not look like a boat, the diagram, again, is so simple in form. It's linear.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a Quonset hut A-frame type,
Mm-hmm.
hybrid between things. They were, as Diller Scofidio Renfro does, is they were exploring different material techniques and sort of technological sort of how does this building how is it deployed on the site?
Mm-hmm.
But it was interesting that it was intended to be the new library, or at least a temporary library on the site, bookstore, kind of book space. And I thought that, wow, that's interesting that it has such an interesting relationship to the Sterling building. And so both diagrammatically, but also has a lot of departure between the two.
And I'll just add, as I didn't know anything about this little structure. The building is diagram, right? Because given its context, right? It's got one program, right? It's just for books, and its purpose is singular, and the form, but then the form is explored by a research into tensile structures, as it says, and you can kind of pick up on that, but so then if you were to treat a building like a diagram, how do you then, I keep trying to describe to the students, what do you add, what do you take away, and it execute, it still reads as the intention of the diagram. And so this thing is it's about books, but it's made with a tensile structure engineered system, but the books are part of what hold the system together, the ballast of books, which I find pretty interesting. That the interior, the usage, the program of the space is part of this thing staying together, right? If you take the books away, this thing might fall down. Well, hopefully not, but
right.
The concept of that, right?
But you're right. So if you think about it from a diagramming standpoint, is just the way you entered that discussion. We think about program. What does this building need to be? How do we then take that idea, a building for books? How do we make the books integral to the structure and the form? Like, if that's your prompt? How do we make the books integral to the structure and the form? Now you can start to generate a series of diagrams about what that may or may not be. And then when you arrive at the point where you realize that the books themselves are anchoring the structure as a ballast and sort of a counterweight, to the form itself, because it is sort of tensile and wants to sort of separate and kind of break, kind of break apart. You're kind of anchoring it to the ground. The books basically become almost the foundation. So there's lots of metaphors, that you can start to play with it there. Right. But what does that start to look like? And that's where you're kind of getting this diagramming, both in section and then ultimately moving back and forth,
Mhm.
between section and plan. And then what, like you were getting to right at the end there, and then what can you strip away? Like
Right.
what's unnecessary to it? So kind of going back to the Marlon Blackwell thing, is the paint really necessary, or is that just sort of the last move? And I in my case, my view of it was sort of the last move. It wasn't really almost required. Um, it could have been unpainted, and I think still had the same effect, at least for me. Sort of in, admittedly, I wasn't there, but um, I think that that's sort of an interesting sequence of designing with a diagram in mind, and sort of that exercise of what it can and what results it can start to create for you.
And yeah, and yeah, great. That's a great summary, and um, a totally, well, I would say, a unique take, but still, speaking the same language, right? As far as the nature and methods of architecture, since you're not in our studio physically. So yeah, I appreciate it. I think I hope the students. I'm going to try and for our sake and the students' sake, edit this pretty quickly so I could try and get an aspect of it into their hands before Friday when they have to present
That's
their
a bonus.
Pechakucha. That's right.
That's a bonus. Yeah.
And so with that, I guess it's time to let you go, Jamie. But thanks again for the sketches. It's fun to kind of go back in time a little bit, uh, and Venice is always kind of a fun place to take that trip.
Absolutely. Anytime.